Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. You know Teddy, my buddy who spent last week at his grandparents' house and is home, and he had a great time with his grandparents, and it's so nice to have him back. He'll probably fall asleep and start snoring momentarily. We are here to do my massive book haul for the month of April. It's really big, and I've been mentioning that all month because it started with a trip to Seattle that Joel and I took, where we went to a lot of independent bookstores and brought a lot of books home, and it's just gotten bigger as the month progressed. And then Independent Bookstore Day happened, so I didn't realize it until this morning as I was getting ready to film, but my biggest book haul ever was in October, I think, of last year. Because Joel and I had gone to a book conference at the end of September and beginning of October, and we took a lot of books home with us. This book haul beats that one by about 6 or 7 books. I can't remember the exact numbers from this morning, but yeah, this is my new biggest book haul ever, and it's a lot. It'll be interesting to see what happens when I do a book haul revisit for this in a year, because there are books, well, a pile of it is stuff that was sent to me by publishers. I don't include anything that was gifted to me. There are some books that will come toward the end that are plays that I got for $1. I probably won't include those in the book haul revisit, some Agatha Christie books. And there are some Pulitzer or Pulitzer adjacent books in here. So not everything in this will be something that I'm going to hold myself accountable for when I do that book haul revisit. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in a year. And the previous biggest book haul ever will be linked down below, as well as my book haul revisit for April, which obviously does not have any of these in it, and last month's book haul as well. So you can find all that down below, as well as affiliate links to all of these books. Because there are so many of them, I'm going to try to get through them very quickly. When I did that book haul in October, it was an hour long, over an hour long, and I don't want to do that again. So especially when we get to some of the older titles or the Pulitzer adjacent titles and the plays, I'm not going to do a lot of description about them. So I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, and we'll see how that goes. And as I go through, there will be affiliate links down below. If you want more information about a book, you can use those links, or you can purchase or pre-order the books there, or you could shop at your local independent bookstore or order from them, or check your local library. And if your local library doesn't have the book, you can always recommend that they purchase a copy. All right, let's dive in without any more setting up. And the way I have done this is I've separated the books into 5 piles. You can't see them, but there are 5 big piles, like just under the camera. So we're going to talk about the books that have been gifted to me by publishers first. Some of them are out now. Some of them would be pre-orders if you are interested in them. Then we're going to talk about the books that I got on Independent Bookstore Day. Then we will talk about the books that Joel and I got on our trip to Seattle. Then we will talk about regular book purchases that happened this month at my local used bookstore and other places. And then we will talk about the plays and the Agatha Christie books last. So let's dive in with the books that were sent to me by publishers. The first one is Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. I have already read this book. It's a shame it won't count for my book haul revisit next year because it was gifted to me, because it would be great to already have a win in my pocket. But still, I really liked this book, so it's already kind of a win in my pocket. And this is sort of in the same realm as On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong and Lie With Me by Philippe Besson, in that, like Ocean Vuong, Sean Hewitt started out as a poet. He also wrote a memoir, and this is his first novel. And it's also about someone looking back at his adolescence. In this book, he is already out of the closet when the book when the reflections begin, but he experiences first love, or first obsession at least, or first lust maybe, when he meets another teenage boy who is temporarily staying in the town and who he just is really fascinated with. Because Sean Hewitt is a poet, you can imagine the writing is lush and gorgeous, and There is a great economy of words as well. It's a relatively short book, but it packs a lot in, and everything feels very precise in the way that you can tell somebody is a poet, because all of the words feel carefully curated for maximum impact. It's such a good and well done book. It is out now from Knopf. Thank you, Knopf, for this copy. And in my book hauls, I like to read a little bit from the opening of the book to give you a sense of what it's about. I will probably not do that for everything in this book haul because, again, we're going to try to keep things rolling along, but I will read from this one. And usually I skip over prologues to get to the real first chapter, but I'm going to start with the prologue in Open Heaven. Time runs faster backwards. The years, long, arduous, and uncertain when taken one by one, unspool quickly, turning liquid, so one summer becomes a shimmering light that, almost as soon as it appears in the mind, is subsumed into a dark winter, a relapse of blackness that flashes to reveal a face, a fireside, a snow-encrusted garden. So you can see that beautiful writing I was talking about right there in that first sentence of Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt, which is available now. And it's a great book. I would highly recommend it to you. If you are someone who does Pride reading in the month of June, this would be a perfect recommendation for you, or even for beyond Pride Month, because we can read Pride books all year long. The next book that was sent to me is Flashlight from FSG. This is published by, or written by Susan Choi, who won a National Book Award for a book called Trust Exercise. I had to think about that for a second. It's a big book. This one will be published on June 3rd. So this would be a pre-order. And you can do that through Bookshop with the link down below. You can do that at your local independent bookstore. You can even check that to see if your library is going to be getting a copy. I'm willing to bet that they will be. If they're not, you can recommend that they purchase a copy once again. And the benefit of new and upcoming books is that if they do make the purchase, usually you are the first person on the hold list, which is just a fun little, it's fun when that happens. I like it. Here is a very short description. A major new novel from the National Book Award winner Susan Choi, Flashlight spans decades and continents in a spellbinding investigation of loss, memory, and the ways in which we are shaped by what we cannot see. It sounds really interesting, and I love the cover. Here is how this book begins. Louisa and her father are making their way down the breakwater, each careful step on the heaved granite blocks one step farther from shore. Her mother is not even on the shore, for example, seated smiling on the sand. Her mother is shut inside the small, almost waterfront house they are renting, most likely in bed. That is the opening of Flashlight by Susan Choi, coming out on June 3rd from FSG. Also from FSG, I got Exit Zero, a story collection from Marie-Helene Bertino, author of Beautyland, which was one of the most consistent books popping up on best of lists toward the end of the year last year. And she also wrote a book called Parakeet. I'm actually really interested in reading Parakeet. Some of her writing, like Beautyland, involves aliens. This is a story collection that does involve vampires and ghosts, which is not typically my thing. It's usually a bit of a turnoff. But I consistently hear good things about Marie-Helene Bertino to the point where I admit I'm curious. I had thought that I would just try to get a copy of Parakeet at some point, but when FSG offered this, I wasn't going to say no because I am now curious. So there's a short description on this. Death-shaped entities with all their humor and disruption stalk the 12 stories in Exit Zero. Vampires, ghost girls, fathers, blank spaces, day-old peaches, and famous paintings pierce through their world and into ours, reminding us to pay attention and look alive, and offering many other flashes of wisdom. That is the description of Exit Zero. I know not everybody is a short story fan. I am a short story fan, so maybe this would be a good way for me to have an introduction to Marie-Helene Bertino. The dedication is for Claudia Ballard's lucky right ankle. I don't know what that means, but I find it amusing. So the first story in this collection is called Marry the Sea, and here is how it opens. This never happened. A cargo ship unloading in New York Harbor drops a crate that cracks in two and explodes into thousands of pink and yellow parakeets. That is how this book opens. Then I have 2 books from Tin House. The reason I like Tin House is that they are a bit quirky, and I really hope that continues because Tin House was recently purchased by, I think, Zando Publishing, and I really hope Tin House manages to keep its identity because they have very quirky books, very interesting and diverse range of authors and stories that are told. And I really like that. They also have very visually interesting cover designs, and I hope that continues as well. And this is also a finished copy. I believe this is out in stores now. The tale begins with Agnes. After losing her baby, Agnes is called to the great manor house to nurse the local lord's baby boy. But something is wrong with the child. His nails grow too fast, his skin smells of soil, and his eyes remind her of the dark forest. As he grows into a boy, then into a man, a plague seems to follow him everywhere. Trees wither at the roots, fruits rot on their branches, and the town turns against him. The man takes a wife who bears him a son, but tragedy strikes in cycles, and his family is forced to consider their own malignancy. Until wife after wife, death after death, plague after plague, every woman he touches becomes a ghost. The ghosts become a chorus, and they call urgently to our narrator as she tries to explain in our very real world exactly what has happened to her. The ghosts can all agree on one thing: an inescapable truth about this man, this powerful lord who has loved them and led them each to ruin. If you leave, you die. But if you die, you stay. Sounds really intriguing. And there's a bit of a, I have peeked at the opening sentence of this one, and it's interesting. So here we go. Dawn through the window, pour light. This is a fairy tale. The ghosts shift along the walls of our apartment. I correct myself. His apartment. Everything is in order, the way he wants it. The furniture luxurious but sparse, modernly eclectic, a sofa clad in green velour, the kind of wooden dining table you'd find in a monastery, a glass cabinet, this armchair. Let's stop there. That is Sour Cherry by Natalia Theodorodou. I don't know if I mentioned the name the first time around, but thank you to Tin House for this. And thank you to Tin House for Hellions Stories by Julia Elliott. I know people aren't 100% sold on short stories. I am interested in them. And again, another really beautiful, visually interesting cover design. I hope that doesn't change over time now that they have been purchased. This has a blurb from Carmen Maria Machado on the front that says, "I am obsessed with these lush, feral stories." And Jeff Vandermeer says, "Astonishing." There are longer quotes from both of them on the back. I'm not going to read them because, again, I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. Here is the short description on the back. From the acclaimed author of The Wilds comes an electric story collection that blends folklore, fairy tales, Southern Gothic, and horror, reveling in the collision of the familiar with the wildly surreal. The first story is called Bride, and here's how it begins. Wilda whips herself with a clump of blackberry brambles. She can feel cold from the stone floor pulsing up into her cowl, chastising her animal body. She smiles. Each morning, she thinks of a new penance. Let's stop there. That is the beginning of the first story in Hellions by Julia Elliott. Again, thank you to Tin House. Now a nonfiction book that was sent to me by the Dial Press. This is called A Live Day, a memoir by Carrie Fugit. And it sounds really interesting. This will be out on May 20th, so this is another one that would be a pre-order. So Carrie Fugit is living out of her car in a Kmart parking lot when her boyfriend Cleve suggests, maybe we should get married or something. Carrie says yes out of love, but also out of convenience. As a 20-year-old high school dropout who ran away from her family and recently lost her job, Carrie has nowhere else to turn. Just months after they elope, Cleve's Marine unit is deployed to Iraq. Then Carrie gets the call. Cleve's Humvee has been hit by an IED, and he's suffered severe injuries. And from there, the description goes on to detail the fights that they have with insurance companies and medical companies to get him the care he needs, the difficulties of having him readjust to life back home and the emotional scars that he carries with him, and her trying to help him. It sounds kind of emotionally devastating, but at the same time, it sounds like a really important story, and I'm grateful to the Dial Press for sending me a copy of it. Again, this will be out on May 20th. So those are the books that were sent to me by publishers this month. Let's move into the books that I got on Independent Bookstore Day. I have these grouped by stores. Usually, I always go to Montana Book Company on Independent Bookstore Day. They are my favorite independent bookstore. Great people. I love them. It was such a party at their store. It was crowded, but everybody was in a good mood, so it just felt fun and joyous. I love it. There is a used bookstore about a block away from where Montana Book Company is, so we usually fit that in as well. That's called Aunt Bonnie's. And usually, because we like to go to Helena for Independent Bookstore Day, those are the only two stores we managed to fit in. But we did get in the car and drive outside of Helena to a small town in Montana called Townsend to go to Reading Leaves. And I'm so glad we finally got out there. It's been a store that I have wanted to visit for a long time. But so I have them grouped by what we got in each store. We're going to start with Montana Book Company. And the first two books that I got at Montana Book Company are related to each other, so I'm going to talk about them together. We have On the Calculation of Volume 1 by Solveig Ball, translated by Barbara Haviland, and On the Calculation of Volume 2 with the same author and translator. On the Calculation of Volume 1 is currently shortlisted for the International Booker Prize. And originally, when it was on the long list, and then again when it made it to the short list, I was very skeptical that this would be something that I would be interested in. But I've gotten really great feedback on it. And that has sort of lured me back to the point where I feel like I would be very interested. I had been thinking, maybe I want to find a copy of that. Maybe I'll see if my library has it. I don't think my library did, but I think they were getting a copy. So when I saw this on the shelf at Montana Book Company next to Volume 2, I figured I just had to take a leap and get them. It's not the book that I would have expected to purchase first off of the International Booker long list, but I also figured if I'm going to get it, I might as well get Volume 2. So here we are. These are published by NDP, and here is the description of this book. Tara Selter, the heroine of On the Calculation of Volume, has involuntarily stepped off the train of time. In her world, the 18th of November repeats itself endlessly, kind of Groundhog Day-ish. We meet Tara on her 122nd 18th of November. She no longer experiences the changes of days, weeks, months, or seasons. She finds herself in a lonely new reality without being able to explain why. How is it that she wakes every morning into the same day, knowing to the exact second when the blackbird will burst into song and when the rain will begin? Will she ever be able to share this strange existence with her beloved and now chronically baffled husband? And I'm not going to read the description of Volume 2. You can imagine just the story continues. So you can make assumptions about things that happen based on that. I'm usually very reluctant to dive into a series, and ultimately there are going to be 7 books in this. So I don't quite know how I feel about that, but at least I have the first 2 books to give myself a sense of what they are like, and I can decide if I want to continue with the series from there. So as I was browsing through the bookshelves at Montana Book Company, I saw The Road to Dalton by Shannon Bowring, which I have had recommended to me and which I have seen other booktubers talk about, and which just sounds like something I would like. And then I didn't realize it until I picked this copy up off of the shelf. It's got a blurb from Morgan Talty, who is an author I really like, a nice guy. And I love Night of the Living Rez. And he says, paved with beauty, grace, humility, and love, a triumphant work that reminds us what literature should be. There's also a blurb from Richard Russo, not to skimp on Richard Russo. This is from Europa Editions, and here's the description. A luminous new novel of small-town America, The Road to Dalton offers valuable understandings of what it means to be alive in the world, of pain and joy, conflict and love, and the endurance that comes from living. In the final weeks of 1989, a fender bender breaks the silence on an icy dark road outside Dalton, Maine, setting in motion events that will ripple throughout the town in ways no one can foresee. When the consequences of the accident play out, the community is left reeling. Lives are left bare, and we are reminded that no one is precisely who we think they are. Sounds fascinating. There is also a sequel out. I cannot remember the name of it. So if I like this, I can move on to that. Look at me. I say I don't like jumping into series. But here I am with 2 books that are part of a series. I don't know if it's going to continue past the second one. Interestingly, there is a quote from Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio. That might be a book that comes up later. There is a prologue. You know what? We're just going to do it because I'm trying to be fast. Prologue. Imagine this. You were driving alone on a road in northern Maine, your head's still humming from the monotonous drone of I-95, that empty highway. On the radio, nothing but static and outdated country music. Let's stop there. That is The Road to Dalton by Shannon Bowring. I'm excited to have a copy of this, and I'm excited to read this at some point. This is a book that has history with me. I was browsing around, and as part of their Independent Bookstore Day event, Montana Book Company had a library cart of books that were 50% off. And Dennis Johnson's Tree of Smoke was on that pile. Now, this is a brick of a book. It was published in 2007. It's over 700 pages. I began this book when it was first published because there was a sense that this was the book that was going to get Dennis Johnson his Pulitzer Prize for fiction. He ended up never winning one. I have a video talking about the 2012 Pulitzer controversy where I think he really should have won. I'll have that video linked down below. But at the time this came out, it felt like this is the one that's going to do it for him. And then it ended up not happening. The thing is, when I started this book, it's kind of written like an acid trip of a Vietnam War novel. And I had the flu, so I had a fever, and it was making me feel like I was losing my mind. So I had to put it down temporarily. And then putting it down temporarily meant I've never gotten back to it. And somewhere along the way, because I've moved several times since then, I don't have a copy of it anymore. So I figured, especially since it was 50% off, I might as well get a copy because I feel like this is going to be something that will be adjacent to my Pulitzer Prize project when I look at the book that won. I think that was 2007. Is that when The Road by Cormac McCarthy was published? I don't think anything would have beaten The Road, but if I have the right year. Tree of Smoke is the story of William Skip Sands, CIA, engaged in psychological operations against the Viet Cong and the disasters that befall him. It is also the story of the Houston brothers, Bill and James, young men who drift out of the Arizona desert and into a war where the line between disinformation and delusion has blurred away. That sounds like something that has only gotten more timely. In the words of Michiko Kakutani in the New York Times, Tree of Smoke is, quote, bound to become one of the classic works of literature produced by that tragic and uncannily familiar war. Here is how it begins. 1963. Last night at 3 a.m., President Kennedy had been killed. Seaman Houston and the other 2 recruits slept while the first reports traveled around the world. There was one small night spot on the island, a dilapidated club with big revolving fans in the ceiling and 1 bar and 1 pinball game. The 2 Marines who ran the club had come by to wake them up and tell them what had happened to the president. That is how Tree of Smoke begins by Dennis Johnson, a great American author if you are unfamiliar. Now let's talk about the books that I got from Aunt Bonnie's, which is a used bookstore. I had mentioned a couple of months ago that I found a copy of, I think it's The Trees by Conrad Richter. And The Town is the book that won Conrad Richter a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. But it's the 3rd in a trilogy. And usually in cases where a book is part of a series, I'm intending to read the previous books. I'm not going to do that for everything. Like Upton Sinclair won a Pulitzer for the 3rd book in a spy series. I don't feel like I want to read the first 2. But in this case, I certainly do want to read the first 2 books because it is a progression. The idea is it's about the American pioneer experience. So you start with the forest because as people are moving into this area, there's a big forest. They cut down the forest and then you get the fields because now they are farming. And then the 3rd volume, the one that won him a Pulitzer, is The Town because now the trees are gone, the fields are being taken over by a town. So it's sort of about the march of progress. And I feel like I can't just read the town. I need to get the first two in there as well. So I finally found a copy of The Fields. I know there are copies that you can order online. I like to try to find things in person. So I finally have a copy. It's beautiful. And it's very tiny print. The spine on this has clearly nobody has read this before. I can tell because the spine is immaculate. So I'll have to be very careful with it when I do read it. So this is one of my Pulitzer adjacent books. I don't think I'll include it in a book I'll revisit in a year. And now we get to Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson, the book that was quoted in one of the other books we've talked about. I don't remember which anymore. I think it was The Road to Dalton. And this is a beautiful edition. It was only for $1, so I grabbed it. There is no description on the back of this book. It just says that this is the first completely new edition of the book since its first publication in 1919. So if you want to know what Winesburg, Ohio is about, it's a classic of American literature, kind of forgotten classic. And it'll be interesting, again, sort of adjacent to my Pulitzer Prize project for when I get to 1919, when it was originally published. So the link will be down below. You can get more information about what this book is about. I am going to just keep this moving. It opens with a map, and I love a book that opens with a map. It's Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. This is fully a Pulitzer book purchase for me. Laughing Boy by Oliver Lafarge won the Pulitzer Prize, I want to say in 1929, or in 1930 for 1929. And he is the second youngest person to ever win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. He won when he was 29, I think, and Josephine Johnson won when she was 24. They are the only people who have won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction in their 20s. I'm not going to go into what this is about. So I thought there's a chance this is a first edition. And it's very rare and difficult to find a first edition of Laughing Boy with the dust jacket. The dust jacket is extremely difficult to find, and that is what makes copies of it expensive. So I found a place online that tells you how to find, and it has all of the signs on the copyright page. However, that page that showed the indications that you have a first edition had a picture of this page. And in a first edition, this design right here, the illustration, is in red. So it's not a first edition, but I'm guessing it's not a first edition, but it's close. And that's pretty cool. And I love the way books used to look. Sometimes hardcovers are referred to as cloth-bound books, and this is where that term comes from, because this actually is cloth-bound, and I just love it. Then there's Memento Mori by Muriel Spark. This was a book I had been looking for a long time. I bought Muriel Spark's The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie when we were in Edinburgh, because it felt like that was just an appropriate place to buy a copy. I liked it, and I had been wanting to get a copy of Memento Mori, but I have not managed to do it until just now. And again, this is a case where there's no description on the book, just this fun illustration. So we're going to move on. But I'm very excited to have this in my library. Then we went to Reading Leaves, which is, again, in that small town called Townsend. And they have bookstore cats. They were very adorable. We got 2 books there. First is This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. This is one of the most frequently banned or challenged books in the United States these days. And because of that, I had been thinking about purchasing a copy. The difficulty for me is this is a young adult guide, and I am obviously not a young adult anymore. So it feels like this isn't necessarily a book for me. However, we were there. I decided I will purchase a copy, and what I will do is I might read it or skim it, but I will probably find like a little free library somewhere in Missoula and just put it in there. Or I'll just find some way to put this out into the community. So maybe someone who is in the age group that this is aimed at will find it and get some use out of it. Because again, this is one of the most banned and challenged books in the United States these days. So that's the plan with that. And I got a copy of American Born Chinese by Jean Louis Yang. This is a graphic novel, and I've heard really good things about it. and I've never had a copy. So maybe now I will actually get around to reading it. And there are fun illustrations. Again, because of time, I'm going to leave this one alone. And that way we can start talking about the books that Joel and I got in Seattle. But there will be a link in the description box to more information about that book. All right. Books we got in Seattle. The first one on my pile is Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. I've heard so many good things about this book for months at this point. So when I saw it in a bookstore in Redmond called Brick and Mortar Books, great store, by the way. I really enjoyed it. The owner is such a nice guy. We had met him when we were at that conference I mentioned in September and October. So I saw this on the table and immediately wanted to get a copy. And people always tend to say that the UK covers are better. I actually find this very fun. The googly eyes, the fact that the googly eyes are shiny, it's fun. This is from Henry Holt, and here's the description. On the island of Sicily, amid the Peloponnesian War, the Syracusans have herded the Athenian invaders into a quarry and left them to rot. Enter Lampo and Gelon, two out-of-work potters with a soft spot for poetry and drink. Armed with nothing but a few blocks of cheese and too much free time, they head down to the quarry, offering to feed any Athenian who can recite a few lines from their great playwright Euripides. Before long, their ambition grows into something far grander, to direct a full-blown production of Medea, a decision that will test their courage and loyalties in ways they could never have imagined. Told with a contemporary Irish flair, Glorious Exploits is a riotously funny and deeply human ode to the unbreakable bonds of friendship, the power of art in a time of war, and the persistence of the human spirit across the ages. There's even a fun owl with googly eyes, like an old Grecian-looking design owl with googly eyes. I get a kick out of that. Here is how this book opens. It opens with a map. I love a book that opens with a map. It opens Syracuse, 412 BC. So Gelon says to me, let's go down and feed the Athenians. The weather's perfect for feeding Athenians. Gelon speaks the truth. And we're going to stop there. But I'm so excited to have this book. Hopefully I will manage to read this soon. And if you are ever in Redmond, Washington, eat at Pomegranate Bistro and go to Third Place Books. I highly recommend both. When we visited Queen Anne bookstore in Seattle, I found a lot of really interesting books. It's another really adorable bookstore. If you're in Seattle, I would recommend checking it out. And what I decided to get is this nonfiction book, Once Upon a Tome, The Misadventures of a Rare Bookseller by Oliver Darkshire. I had heard about this book about a year ago when this was in hardcover, and it must have recently come out in paperback because they had it on a display. Actually, it was on the staff picks section at Queen Anne Book Company, and it's a beautiful cover with that little foil. I love it. It has French flaps. I love paperbacks with French flaps, so it's fun. And here is a photo of Oliver Darkshire. He is part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So this, even though this is a memoir of like being a rare bookseller, it has that sort of queer angle. So I might even earmark this for June. Here is the short description on the back. Welcome to Sutherland's, one of the oldest bookshops in the world, with its weird and wonderful clientele, suspicious cupboards, unlabeled keys, poisoned books, and some things that aren't even books, presided over by one deeply eccentric apprentice. And I am guessing that the deeply eccentric apprentice is Oliver Darkshire. I'm really excited to read this as well. Okay, now we're going to talk about some books that we got at Elliott Bay. While we were there, I did manage to talk to a bookseller and get some recommendations, but the first two are going to be things that we picked up on our own. On the way to Seattle, we listened to the audiobook of Kate and Frida, the new book by Kim Fay. In that book, it mentions Laurie Colwin's Home Cooking, A Writer in the Kitchen, a lot. Laurie Colwin is an author who was put on my radar by Ann Patchett, and I have been wanting to read one of her books ever since. I have a couple in my library already, but Home Cooking is one that I consistently hear good things about. So the inclusion of Home Cooking in Kate and Frida made me really want to get this book. And these new editions of Laurie Colwin's books have really great covers. A seminal work of American food writing, part essay collection, part cookbook that reshaped the way we think about what we eat, Laurie Coleman's Home Cooking is The One True Kitchen Friend, a modern classic that weaves together memories, recipes, and wild tales of years spent in the kitchen. And this is from Vintage. I forgot to say, Once Upon a Tome is from Norton. Here is how home cooking begins. Unlike some people who love to go out, I love to stay home. This may be caused by laziness, anxiety, or xenophobia, and in the days when my friends were happily traveling to Bolivia and Nepal, I was ashamed to admit that what I liked best was hanging around the house. Home Cooking by Laurie Coleman. And this one was really for Joel. 32 Yolks from My Mother's Table to Working the Line by Eric Repair. Joel listened to this book he did this on ebook in either March or February, I don't remember which, and he loved it. It is one of his favorite books of the year so far. It is Eric Repair's memoir. Eric Repair is a fantastic chef. I've never actually eaten his food. He's also a silver fox. Google a photo. And Joel really loved this book. So this book actually lives on Joel's bookshelf, but I would really like to read it at some point. So that is another thing that we got at Elliott Bay. And then the two books that were recommended by a bookseller in Elliott Bay. He really understood what I look for, like a sense of empathy. I love that. And when I talked about it, he said one of the first books he thought of was Outline by Rachel Cusk. Now, I've never read Rachel Cusk. I feel hesitant to read Rachel Cusk, but the way he talked about Outline, which has a shiny cover, so it's a little hard to get it without glaring in the light. It reminded me of Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, which I really loved, and that made me very curious. So he recommended about 6 or 7 books, and I picked 2, so this ended up being one of them. There's no description on the back, so we're just going to move on. I'm hoping that at some point soon I will manage to read this and see what I think of it. Before the flight, I was invited for lunch at a London club with a billionaire I'd been promised had liberal credentials. That is how Outline by Rachel Cusk opens. I'm sorry, I'm trying to move quickly. The other book he recommended was Transit by Anna Seegers. And this, I believe, is translated, but it doesn't say the translator's name. Yeah, translated from the German by Margot Betauer Dembo, and you can guess it's a New York Review of Books title because they all look like this. Anna Seegers' Transit is an existential, political, literary thriller that explores the agonies of boredom, the vitality of storytelling, and the plight of the exile with extraordinary compassion and insight. There's a much longer description, but again, in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of move along, but I think you can see why. This sounds depressing, but depressing is essential sometimes. There are stories that need to be told and remembered, and it just sounds really fascinating based on the feedback from that bookseller at Elliott Bay. Let me work my way past the introduction. Okay, chapter 1. They're saying that the Montreal went down between Dakar and Martinique, that she ran into a mine. The shipping company isn't releasing any information. It may just be a rumor. But when you compare it to the fate of other ships and their cargoes of refugees, which were hounded over all the oceans and never allowed to dock, which were left to burn on the high seas rather than being permitted to drop anchor merely because their passengers' documents had expired a couple of days before, then what happened to the Montreal seems like a natural death for a ship in wartime. That is Transit by Anna Seegers, translated from the German. And then we went to a used bookstore called Twice Sold Tales in Seattle, and I had a time. We're going to get through these quickly. If you have followed along for a while, you know that I absolutely love Sonora Babb's book, Whose Names Are Unknown. I talk about it at great length in discussing The Grapes of Wrath as part of my Pulitzer Project. I'll link that down below. I didn't realize there were other books of hers that were published. And as I was browsing, I saw The Lost Traveler. So I had to get it. And I'm so excited to have another Sonora Babb book that I can read. In the interest of time, as much as it pains me, we're going to keep going. I've already read Love and Saffron by Kim Fay, but I wanted a copy for my library, and we just happened to find one. This is a great book. It's an epistolary novel about friendship and food. and bravery, and I would highly recommend it. It's very good. If you know me, you know I am obsessed with Edna Ferber, and they had one book of hers that I don't own, Nobody's in Town, 2 short novels by Edna Ferber. Love the cover of this. They also had an autobiography of hers, and I regret not getting that. But here we are. So, Nobody's in Town. The other book, Nobody's in Town and Trees Die at the Top. Edna Ferber. I am such a fan. Fanny herself is the only one of Edna Ferber's books that I've actually read so far. She's a Pulitzer winner for a book called So Big. Speaking of the Pulitzer Prize and my project, William Kennedy won a Pulitzer Prize for a book called Ironweed, which is the 3rd installment of a trilogy. And as we talked about with Conrad Victor earlier, I want to read the first 2 books first. So I found one of the books, which is called Legs, pretty easily. I had a devil of a time finding Billy Phelan's Greatest Game, which is the other book in the cycle. I believe it's called the Albany Cycle, and I'm so excited to finally have a copy. And once I get around to William Kennedy as part of my Pulitzer project, it's nice. It'll be so nice to have that lined up so I can just tear through them. If you follow along, you know I am intrigued by John McGahern. I picked up one of his books when Joel and I were in Ireland last year. Amongst Women, loved it. One of the books of his that I had most wanted to read is his collected stories. They had a copy. I grabbed it, and here it is. And for $1, The Iceman Cometh by Eugene O'Neill. I did a project on Eugene O'Neill when I was in college and really loved his work. The Iceman Cometh is one of the plays that I didn't read. Classic play, haven't read it, and as I said, I'm trying to build out my play collection. Or I believe I said that. If I didn't, I'm trying to build out my play collection, and this is one that I would love to read because I'm a fan of Eugene O'Neill. All right. That takes us to the other books that I got during the month. First is Confederates in the Attic, Dispatches from the Unfinished Civil War by Tony Horwitz. I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about this one because I talked about it a bit in my deep dive on Geraldine Brooks's book, March, which will also be linked down below. Tony Horwitz was her husband, and his obsession with the Civil War began when they moved to Virginia, and one morning he is awoken by what sounds like gunshots. And when he goes to explore, he finds a group of men doing a Civil War reenactment, and he falls into a rabbit hole getting to know the people in this community. And the book is about how there are still traces of resentment and people who still glorify the Old South. And if I remember correctly, this is not actually a Civil War photo. This is a photo of one of those Civil War reenactors. I could be wrong about that. It's a fascinating book that has really just proven to be even more timely and intelligent with time. I highly recommend it. These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. I'm slowly looking for every Ann Patchett book in hardcover. And this is one of the ones that is most consistently recommended to me. It is essays. It has her previous dog, Sparky Van Davender, in illustration on the cover. So I'm looking forward to getting around to this one, since it turned up at my local used bookstore. Speaking of Ann Patchett, she is the owner of the bookstore Parnassus in Nashville. And Lindsay Lynch, who is the book buyer for the adult books there, mentioned that she was going to reread I Captured the Castle by Dodie Smith in March. She apparently reads it every March. And that really captured my interest. So I found a copy of I Captured the Castle at my local used bookstore. This is the story of 17-year-old Cassandra and her family who live in not-so-genteel poverty in a ramshackle old English castle. Here she strives over 6 turbulent months to hone her writing skills. She fills 3 notebooks with sharply funny yet poignant entries. Her journals candidly chronicle the great changes that take place within the castle's walls and her own first descent into love. By the time she pens her final entry, she has captured the castle and the heart of the reader in one of literature's most enchanting entertainments. So that really captured my interest. Well, I'm really excited to have that book. Zorba the Greek by Nikos Kazantzakis. I have seen the movie. I like the movie. I've never read the book, but basically you have a sort of Englishman who comes to Greece and he becomes entranced by Zorba the Greek. And The movie starring Anthony Quinn and Alan Bates is good, and I would be very interested in reading the book. Happy to have a copy of it. I found a hardcover copy of The Turmoil by Booth Tarkington. This is another case where Booth Tarkington won a Pulitzer Prize, not a book, for Magnificent Ambersons, which is the second in, I believe, a trilogy. And The Turmoil is the first. And you can find copies online, even digital copies, because the copyright is expired on this one. But I wanted a book, and I searched for it. I like to make things difficult for myself. Joel actually found this for me in a used bookstore in Billings. So now I can read this and then read The Magnificent Ambersons. And while Joel was in Billings, he also found another Edna Ferber book that I didn't own called One Basket. And at my local used bookstore, let me not knock everything over, I found One Writer's Beginnings by Eudora Welty. Eudora Welty won a Pulitzer Prize for a book called The Optimist's Daughter in the 70s. And this is a short nonfiction book about her childhood and how it inspired her as a writer. So it feels like this will be essential for my Pulitzer Prize project as well. So you can see why a chunk of these books are from my Pulitzer project and therefore are being purchased for a different purpose than the others. All right, let's cover the Agatha Christie books. Again, I'm just gonna roll through them because I'm trying to collect the Miss Marple books so I can reread them. I got A Caribbean Mystery, What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw. One of these is also published under a different name, and I don't remember what the name is. Let's see, my laptop is, oh, it's asleep. Never mind. In the description box down below, you might see it paired with its current title. I don't remember which one has a different name. A lot of Agatha Christie books changed names over time. What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw and A Murder is Announced. And some plays that I got. Now, part of the reason I don't think I'm going to include plays in my book haul revisits is because they don't take up a lot of space, and all of them were for $1. I got Man of La Mancha, written by Dale Wasserman, lyrics by Joe Darion, and music by Mitch Leigh. I've never seen a production of Man of La Mancha, but I'd be very curious to read it. It's inspired by Don Quixote. Fiddler on the Roof, I have not seen the movie since I was a child. I've never seen a production of it, but I feel like it would be fun to read. This is by Joseph Stein. I have read a lot of Arthur Miller, but I have not read Death of a Salesman, so when this popped up for $1.13 at my local used bookstore, I grabbed it. And The Miracle Worker by William Gibson. I have seen the movie with Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke. Both of them won Oscars for it, and I've never seen a production of it, and I just think it would be fun to have. So there you have it. We're under an hour, still a little long, but we're under an hour, and that's good. So these are all of the books that I brought into my library in the month of April, the incredible, incredible amount of books. I would love to hear your thoughts about these books, if you have recommendations based on my interest in these, and just anything. Let me know what you got for Independent Bookstore Day. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.